Good morning, everybody. Welcome to my acrylic painting session, week 6. And today we're doing a collage painting. I'm really excited to create some vibrant texture using a variety of materials. So I have some bits of cards, some paper, maybe wrapping paper or newsprint or printing paper, normal A4 paper, doesn't matter what color it is. I have got some household brushes, some scissors, PVA glue, white emulsion, and our normal acrylics as we normally start painting with acrylics. Right, so we're looking today at a view of from Anglesey on Penmon Lighthouse and Puffin Island, and I'm more interested in creating the texture of the waves, the foam, the pebbles, without painting them too precise and too defined. Okay, that's why we're going to use some of those layers of cards. Now you could be using the card from the cereal boxes, that you might have a thicker card for the base as a big shape and use some thinner materials for later on. So I'm going to just remove some of these equipment aside, and let's quickly talk about our composition. Now, first of all, I have top part of the composition, which is going to be the sky, and almost two spaces of the sky. Yes, so we've got a third for the sky, probably, maybe 2 sections for the water, roughly. So the lower part of the painting is going to have more collage layers for me. So I'm planning to have, if I'll put this one aside, I have thought of having maybe 2 pieces of paper. Now, it could be done all sorts of ways. You're very welcome to come up with your own layout. I've decided to have 2 pieces of card so I can overlap them and maybe even glue them together slightly in a strange angle, so they don't have perfect corners, don't have perfect 90-degree corners. I quite like change in proportion, maybe of gaps. We've got a wider section, maybe a narrower here. I have found this little piece of card. Maybe that's will be starting representing some of the breaking waves, kind of how they are slowly going away from us. But I might tear it, the base. So before I start gluing anything, I might just have a quick plan of how things could be layered. Okay, so that will be quite nice. Yeah, edge of the waves. I don't think that's, maybe that one could be good as well. If I'll do this one first. Okay, so let's do a bit of planning here. Okay, so that might be somewhere on the side. Okay, maybe that will overlap as well if I'll make one. Maybe one somewhere here, maybe some another one above it or below it, maybe below it. Again, it's nothing too overly major or overly how your piece is supposed to be. It's something to play with. By the time we start painting, some of it will be hidden. All we'll see is just a relief. If I wanted to use some of these ones, they could be used as well, but not overwhelming the painting with too much texture. Maybe something I'll put somewhere here. Okay, what I am interested in is, you know, when we were looking at spaces, for example, I've got a narrow gap somewhere here, but slightly wider shape there. So if I do see that rhythm, I don't want them to be too similar. Same here. If there will be some gaps, or maybe the gaps in between the lines, yeah, might overlap things, narrower shape rather than having the same repetitive pattern. Yeah, so that's what I probably will start moving about. Right, let's start gluing these sections, and then I'll play maybe with the tissue afterwards. So what I'll do here, I'll have generous amount of PVA glue. If you do it on one piece of card and just it in smaller pieces, that's totally fine. I find sometimes if I use kind of collage overlaps like that, the heavier the board, the better. What I might do here as well, because this is going to be a piece which will be at the top, so the edge is not coming off. It's okay for the glue to stay out, you know, if it's a little bit of glue comes out from the board, not a problem whatsoever. Wet surface is totally fine for us. I will secure this board later on my surface. Okay, so it's not going to be moving about too much. Okay, so that's good be glued there. And so it's not going to be sliding as I'm not on a flat surface. I might just secure it on my here. So the two big pieces are attached, a bit of glue there, that's all good. Also give me direction, kind of if things are start moving, I know what's the layout, how it appears. Okay, that's good. Right, now I can just play a bit more. Nothing is going to be running away from me here. Okay, that's will be quite nice. So that could be all painted really, really well with glue. Again, I prefer to be more generously painted with glue rather than not enough. You can use it with a brush. It's okay to have extra glue on your surface here, because by the time we start painting, it might even be better. Sometimes it creates some beautiful cracks when we paint with emulsion and acrylic on top of the damp surface of glue. Okay. All the small dry edges just need to be glued here as well. Okay, I wanted something there and overlapping. So if I have some extra glue, I just smudge it so it just will dry a little bit quicker, but it doesn't matter if it's over your painting. Okay, now I thought I liked one of these ones here as well. Maybe somewhere here. So reasonably straightforward. Any of the shapes you think might work for you. And it does come with practice. You start recognizing how many shapes, or is it going to be too much? Quite like this shape. That's maybe part of my island here. But again, it doesn't have to be even an island. You could paint it. I think I might put it somewhere here. What I do need to watch here, can you see those spaces? Again, almost that space, that space, that space. So, or maybe I need to make that island bigger if I decided to go for the island shape. Just trying to get this shape out. And maybe that's all. Yeah, I think that's will be okay. Okay, getting nicely, generously glued. So let's just move it a bit more narrower space than those two. Okay, that will stay there. That's great. Let's take some of that glue again. Yeah, right. If we're using some paper, a nice way you can work with it is to create some nice rough segments, is to crunch it up, unravel, and then decide maybe part of the shore is going to have a texture here. And I think maybe part of my rock, maybe the shore will be slightly bigger. Maybe that's going to be part of my shore. Maybe that's going to be part of my rock where the lighthouse stands. And what I'll do here, again, I'll paint it with a glue really solidly without leaving any gaps, because the paper is thinner than our card, and if there are any dry surfaces, when we start painting with acrylics, the paper can peel off if you don't glue it properly. So that's my, if I stretch it, it's going to be just a boring flat piece. So I want to crunch it up. That's why I was creasing it and scrunching it earlier on. So somewhere there. Okay. And then any of the those folds, I just put some extra glue into them. And we don't want any air bubbles left. Okay. So it's quite a tonal collage at the moment. So not much differentiation in anything else. Now, it doesn't matter if your card has some pictures on it or prints, letters, whatever, it doesn't matter, as long as, because we're going to be painting it afterwards, as long as it suits your kind of thickness and material. Okay, I quite like some of that crunch up. I want it to be huge, but enough to. Now, you're going to see we've got the same length paper, so I might need to extend something here as well. So if my paper and card is plain and in surface color, it's doesn't have to be. Tissue paper sometimes is good, although I find it's a bit too thin and thicker strokes, but everybody works slightly different. Even if you haven't done it before, till you start working with those materials, you wouldn't know. Okay, so maybe that's how I'll extend it. But gluing some extra pieces here. Okay, something there. Got another one. By the time I crunch it up, it's not going to be too big. So it doesn't have to be perfect within the shapes of our details, like the shoreline or the lighthouse. What I might actually do for my lighthouse, I have got a piece of card here. I might just place it let's have a look. Maybe a tiny bit higher than my island, or maybe I'll make it slightly wider. Let's try it like that. Or shall I go for a slightly narrower version? try. Yeah, if I'll go for a slightly narrower version, I can always paint extra things to it. No, I'll go for a bigger one. Okay, that's okay. Otherwise, I start clashing with a. So that's what I was looking for. I was looking, is it clashing anywhere in widths? Is it clashing anywhere? Okay, and I can just make it slightly smaller. Okay, good. Again, it makes us think about shapes when we start painting. Okay, somewhere there. Brilliant. Next stage. Now, I don't have to wait for the glue to dry. What I will do, I'll just take some of the thicker layer of it and just more of a smudge and encourage it to be flat. I'm going to tidy all the bits of card I've removed, and I'm going to start painting. Right, now squeeze some paints. Have some white emulsion, ochre, emerald green, ultramarine, some violet, and a bit of black. And what I'm going to use a very big brush, maybe a couple of big brushes, maybe this one will come in later on, and start working into the main tones. Now I'd like to have my sky to have a bit of warmth in it. So I'm going to start with darker tones, and I'm going to build them up lighter and lighter and lighter as the layers will progress, okay? I'm going to start from rubbing the color into my collage first, and then in later layers, I'll be skimming and I'll be just almost like dry brushing over. So let's have some white emulsion. If it's thicker, even better. So I'm going to have a bit of ochre and a dab of violet. So my sky on the photograph is the lightest. I'm going to exaggerate some of the colors, but my sky is the lightest one. However, I'm going to start with making it slightly darker than the final colors. So I can build up a bit of depth within the clouds in the sky. So I'm just going to make it, just going to paint all of that. That's a bit too dark. I'm going to paint in all the gaps around the island where the collage piece is there. Tiny bit of water. I think my emulsion is a little bit thick. Okay, so I'm just going to paint all of that one there. I can paint over the lighthouse. Now the lighthouse shape stands out, so it will be very easy for me to paint over it and keep it fresh afterwards. So I'm painting all the creases and all the little shapes. That's the first thing, being really, really thorough. Okay. Big shape there. Okay. Now, if I want to have a little bit of a similar color on some of my rocks and some of the protruding rocks in the front, I might just do the same, but slightly darker version while I've got these colors. And the only reason I've got slightly light and darker tones is just because how I was loading the brush. It didn't have to be that way. Okay, slightly darker tones somewhere here. Again, the first stage is to make that card and the shapes. So even if I want to have a wave here later on, but I've got some rocks standing out, I can still paint the wave over this color, but then the stones will look more protruding. Okay, I want part of this rock a bit more. Sorry, stones, pebbles. Much more finer, maybe a little more. Okay, picked up some blue by accident. Maybe a dab of black with it. Make some of the textures here slightly darker. So I'm painting again all in between the creases of the paper. So I haven't really waited for the glue to dry. It will all work together well. Obviously, if you've got lots of thick runny glue, that might be harder for you to work with. But okay, that's good. Right, I want a darker rock for that area. So I'm still using some emulsion. Let's get a bit more violet. Now my layers of paint soak kind of the moisture is absorbed by the card because the card is not primed. So the first layers should be drying quite quickly for you. Okay, a little bit too much ochre, so it means I need to top up more violet. And I want this rock. Again, I'm not too worried if I'll go too outside of its edges, but I need to make sure that I paint within the creases of the paper really well. That's the first stage. Okay, maybe over the lighthouse so it looks like it stands behind it. Now I can decide how far my rocks where the lighthouse stands going to be, how they might be protruding somewhere here. Although I might, because I haven't painted the water here, maybe I need to come back to those shapes afterwards. Okay, so there'll be some other darker rocks somewhere here. Okay. So I'll leave my brown kind of violet brush aside. I'm going to use another one. Tiny bit of water. It's quite a big brush. Okay, I just picked up some violet from the pot. Right, so again, some white. And I'm going to go this time for a dab of emerald green and some ultramarine. Now the brush is very hard to control, and kind of if you want to do some perfect strokes, so we don't want the perfect strokes, we want to have some mucky strokes. Now I'm going for a reasonably dark tone. Okay, tiny bit more paint, otherwise it's a bit too thin on the ground. Okay, anything darker turquoisey color will be fantastic. Can paint over them. Okay, this is quite an unruly brush, which will be superb for texture later. So now I'm just filling up all the spaces I haven't painted yet. So the two colors, the violet light and darker versions of it, here with ochre, and this blue and green turquoisey versions. Going to be our primer for all of the painting. So after that, the paint is not going to be absorbing so much. Again, I don't want any gaps left. Don't want anything. So I'll just wiggle my brush into all the corners. Okay. And I should have painted the island, but it's okay, I haven't. Maybe I painted just to fill it in and then I'll paint over it later. Okay, wiggle my brush into all the gaps. So the horizon is going to be somewhere here for me. And this island. Just need to make sure paint goes underneath of that card. Okay. Now it doesn't matter how much, let's say, I've reduced the color, over painted certain areas, it's totally fine. Right, now the fun part begins. Now I'm going to start working with my larger brushes and define some more details and play with the surfaces and play with some texture. So for example, while I've got my violet brush, I can go for slight change of tone. So for example, if I'll go for slightly lighter, focus maybe on the sky for a moment. Now, color-wise, I'm going to improvise and exaggerate some of the colors from the photograph. The photograph is almost black and white, but I'm interested. I quite like the shapes of the composition of the waves. I like the composition, but I'm not too keen on the actual colors. So I want to make it a bit more personal. So sky-wise, again, and there are some of them. I don't know if you can see it in the photograph, on probably not here. There are a couple of lines of the shadows of the clouds. But again, your own version will be totally fine as well. Right, tiny bit maybe ochre here. A bit more warmth into that. So I have a big brush, and what I'd like to do, I'd like to almost like load it, so a bit of a chunk of paint in it. And I want to, excuse me, just drag it. And let's see how it will settle. Okay, I need more paint. I'll need more paint. Okay, that's a big chunk of paint. That will be easier for me to drag that color. Okay. Tiny bit of water just to let it drag more, but you can see how much paint I have on my brush. That's why I've got a household brush. So I've got a very large brush. So I've got, again, quite a bit of paint, even more than last time. And let's give it another go. If I'll drag it, look at that gorgeous stroke. Really juicy, really thick, really playful. Okay. Okay, if I'll bring a little bit more thicker paint somewhere across. And so really, that's why I'm using emulsion today. So you're not going to be saving your acrylic paints. So have some thick layer. Okay, I want to have another stroke maybe going behind the lighthouse. Okay, something's going to be. I can paint over the lighthouse very easily afterwards, not a problem. And maybe something's going to be, yeah, playful, funky. I've got a bit of paint which run down a little bit too watery there. That's okay. Might just keep it more even, as I don't want to highlight that line. I don't want that line being, that white section being as a line. Okay. So at any point you can just touch things up and paint things over. Yeah, if you wanted to shape your clouds a little bit more. Okay, that's quite exciting. And now if I want to have extra thicker, lighter tone, and maybe I'll do that one later as my brush is dry. I want to do a little bit of basics back with my violet. I will get my island back using some violet. So I don't want my island to be green. It's quite dark. But the texture of the card. So if I just skim the surface of the card, it gives me that uneven edge. Okay. Bit of fresh color close to the water. Okay, that's my board. That's not my painting. That's okay. That's good. That's giving me, yeah, that's kind of without planning the island surface, the silhouette, the edge of the card creates it for me. I just get it a bit more stable at the base. Okay. Now I can use my larger green brush, greeny blue brush, add some more white to it, and introduce maybe, so it's slightly lighter tone, introduce first plans for my waves. So I'm working with larger brushes before I start using any smaller ones. So if I just drag my brush across, whatever the surface it catches, yeah, that will be quite exciting to see how that wave is going to be coming there. So that's maybe my wave at the far back. So white gap. Okay, let's paint that one over. And I have a wave going over. Again, that surface, just by brushing the area, gives us a nice texture. I've got another wave somewhere there, crashing. So the tones are slightly lighter than what the color I had before, and I will slowly start making them bolder. Right, I want some more water in this section, maybe some of the drags going towards us, maybe some more water. Let's bring a little bit more water. So put down a bit more darker color again by using some green and blue. So let's bring some water in between the rocks. And now, because I'm painting over the rocky area, now the blue is going to be more broken, yeah? So we'll see some of the exposed rocks and we'll see some of the hidden ones. Again, when you start doing it within your painting, your strokes will come out slightly different than mine. That's totally fine. Don't try to copy identical size strokes to mine. Just go with the flow of, okay, there are some blue somewhere in the foreground. Okay, if I put a stroke over it, what's it gonna look like? Okay, so that's broken down a bit more. My foreground into some of the rocks. Okay, I think I could do a slightly lighter tone for the water at the back. But that might be more violet and white. Sorry, violet, ultramarine and white. maybe less green. And I want some of that color being next to the island. So we start from some rough shapes, and then we're going to more rough colors, big blocks. And then only after that, we're going to start defining things. Okay, any other paler blues could come in. So the paler blue is more reflecting the light within the sky. The green sections are more the depths of the waves. So maybe paler blue is going to be somewhere reflecting the water, so reflecting the sky. It also makes a variety of color come in. Okay, that's good. My dark green just stopped within the line of my card here. I think I might have overdone the length, so just want to have that darkness not stopping there in one area. Okay, that's better. Okay, that's good. Now I can see some of the basic darknesses on the rocks on the island, but I might have lost some of the darkness on the rocks on the foreground. So, well, I've got that opportunity here. Maybe I'll use some ultramarine and violet together. Just need some more paint. Some minimal color, but maximum impact with brushes. Okay, so I said slightly more blue with violet. So now, because I have some base browns for the rocks, now I can have more dry brush and strokes, maybe even a dab of black with it if I wanted it slightly darker. Okay, maybe just a drag, maybe just placing some of the strokes just to have that exposure painted by using a texture, yeah, just placing certain accidental marks. Dry brush and just really thick paint, but mainly dragging it, or just placing a few. That's quite a nice little mark there. So I'm using the photograph as a reference, but I'm trying to create my own marks, my own interpretations of them. Okay, that's a good one. This one, those little ones. And I constantly look, are they too repetitive? Are they different? Okay, maybe some more darks could go at the base of this group of rocks. Okay, maybe another one. there. Okay, that's good. As it will start drying, it will become less reflective. Okay, that's quite nice. Right now, the foreground. I think I might just do a bit of dragging of the brush. Maybe darker corner, and then the rest is could be a little bit lighter. Okay, that's exciting. Now, I don't want to do too much on my island there, otherwise it will start looking as a rock which is really close to us when it's much more further away from us. Okay, now I think that's good. Let's work with some slightly lighter tones for the waves. So I'll still work, oops, it's all running. Just gonna wipe my brush, my green brush. It has a lot of moisture, more than I expected. Okay. So I'm not washing it, I'm just keeping it slightly lighter in tone. Overall, right, so let's get some white. And I'm going to slowly start adding paler colors. Yeah, so I'm just testing. It's almost like the deepest tone was first, yeah, then that was second one. The greener one and the bluer one were very similar in tone. So my next one's going to be slightly lighter. And again, I'll go for rough placement. So I'm just using the side of the brush to drag it across and just see how it will start catching. Maybe pressing on it slightly more in some places, then releasing it, and then maybe pressing a bit more, maybe again releasing it. So far, I'm aiming for more spontaneous strokes. I can tweak them later. Okay, maybe another one for this broken shape. Okay. So I'm repeating the almost kind of narrow shape, wider shape, again, narrow shape strokes, if I can. I think I'll go for a slightly thinner brush or any other flat brush, larger flat brush. I think this one is quite a wide one. So let's see if I can use slightly narrower brush, but still quite a rough one. So let's go for okay, that's a bit more slightly wider. Okay, maybe this one continues and breaking somewhere here as well. And again, tiny bit more further, maybe behind those rocks. And then anything, I think this one become too big, bold, dark tone. Sorry, too light in this area. If I'll paint over it with a dark color. So if any shapes breaking down the surface too much, I can just paint over them. Okay, and I wanted something maybe elongated strokes as the water coming and the foam was spreading towards us. That's almost hugging the rocks. Okay, so these strokes might stay within that tone when the waves here in the middle ground, we'll start creating, kind of have more and more lighter tones. Right, let me take a photograph at this stage now. So now I'm going to start working more and more into some of those foam crashing sections, the tops of the waves, much more spontaneously. So I'll keep topping up my emulsion, white emulsion, just more thicker, fresher paint. It's not white. Okay, maybe slightly thicker. Okay, that's quite nice. Right, so let's just carry on with some thicker layers of the lighter tone. It's still not fresh white. Just do little skims of drags of the wave going down. Okay, maybe a little hint of the broken wave, little line going up and down gently at the back. At any point, if you've done something you don't like, you can just come back to the background color and give it another stroke, have another line, maybe pick up slightly smaller brush, or the opposite, pick up a wider brush. Now the surface now we created is now slowly starting paying off, because that texture is going to be very exciting. So I'm still working for mainly big chunks of the foamy waves. Okay. Got a chunk of card here, which stops. Okay. Paint over that ridge. Good, and maybe another little one here. So that's a bit nice and playful. And anything paler just coming off, just away from the rocks. Just a bit more away from the rocks. Just almost dry brushing there, just gentle touches there. Okay, now the water is looking much more exciting now. Good. And I can see the bits of card, how they're helping in different sections, how they kind of build up the extra depth there. That's good. Right, I think it's time to go back to the sky and do maybe a little bit more texture on the sky. I want to use a little bit of that greeny blue on my brush, maybe a tiny bit more ultramarine than green, maybe a dab of black to have more of a blue type of gray. So then my sky doesn't stand out on its own too much in color. So I'll work with a bit of depth. Blue there. Looks quite fresh blue, so if I'll have a tiny bit more that gray, more ultramarine, so it does have not just a fresh blue, a bit more dull overcasty tone. Maybe for the base of my clouds and the shadows. Okay, maybe a tiny bit more water. I wanted to drag the paint a bit more. So far in the sky, I have loads of dry strokes, but I can also have some, I'm ignoring the lighthouse, I'm just painting over it. I can have some soft strokes by adding a bit more water. So for example, if I've got all dry strokes, if I'll have some water and soften part of them, that will be good. Maybe a bit more fresher water. Maybe a little bit more transparent, semi-watercolor, that's better. So then if we have a load of details and contrasts on the waves in the foreground, we want the sky to be partially softer. Yes, we can have some contrast in there as well, but partially softer will be more acceptable, much more playful. Okay, quite like that. So then the violet we had earlier on is now a supportive color. It's not just a major one. And that light tone we had again before, it's almost like coming through the clouds, yeah? I might bring some of that light back. Just bring some fresh, thick paint with a dab of ochre. It's almost like it's coming from underneath of the clouds. Maybe a tiny bit more water so it flows easier. And just build up maybe something larger cloud. Again, this is something for us to play with. So I started from a very boring sky in a photograph, and I'm creating much more wonderful and exciting. A violety brown at the back, violety now color with ochre, looks quite pinkish, yeah? That's quite exciting. Again, if I have more watery paint on my brush and just work slow through it tiny bit more. Okay, that's probably enough. All right, I can see slightly, you know, my water went over the island here. I might just tidy that edge up. So the card stands off, the kind of stands above the surface, so I can put a few strokes there. Maybe combine the shoreline with slightly lighter tone reflecting from the sky, maybe not too impulsive, but it's there. Okay, I've got a bit of that warmth now within the water as well. I quite like that. Good.
Julia, what width of brush is that then that you're using now?
Right, the brushes I'm using are my very old household brushes.
Oh, right.
So they're just worn out. The rougher they are, the better.
Right.
So new brush will, you know, just a very big brush will be very exciting. They're just so uneven. It's just, in a way, I haven't got control, but I have got control over some of the surfaces. So instead of, for example, painting individual pebbles here, I'm just going to do a few marks, small marks over the collage surface. And with this size brush, it just creates that texture enough to have a feel for the pebbles, yeah, rather than doing them too precise. I will use a smaller brush as well, Actually, I'm ready to get started on a smaller brush now as well.
Yeah, it works rather well the way you're doing it,
Yes,
but I've
yes,
not
yes,
used
yeah.
used that size. Not used that
Yeah,
size.
oh, absolutely. That's what works here is the uneven surface of the painting, yeah, the collage,
Yeah.
and the big size brushes and a lot of paint. That's where the white emulsion comes in, yeah, because it's
Yeah.
big chunks. You really
Yeah.
place in the paint rather than just rubbing it all in, okay?
Yeah.
Right, my next stage is going to be introducing a little bit more color, a bit more variety of color, a little bit more details. For example, on the darker rocks, maybe a bit more depth within the color of the waves, and obviously painting the lighthouse. So I'm going to start with the lighthouse and build its body a bit more stronger. So I have some white or emulsions white, whichever you prefer. Right, tiny bit of ochre. Just need to get some more color here. Some more violet. So the paint's been going very quickly today. Actually looking at my lighthouse, maybe I will need to have slightly different tones as well. Right, now my lighthouse, because I've glued it as a different block of card, if I paint it, it's not gonna go on the side of the sky. Yeah, it's almost, well, it stands up higher as a relief. So it's much easier for me to paint straighter edges, okay? I'm gonna have a light somewhere on the top as well. Let's see how that goes. And let's find a darker tone for it. I'm going to use more ultramarine. Just wipe my brush with the ultramarine. And a dab of violet with it. Going to have slightly darker tone in the middle. And I'm going to mix two colors together. So I've got my light and I've got my darker tone, so can just mix it in between. Okay. And I can use the same color on the edge here as well. So if I want to introduce again, so while these paints are wet, I can just work into the shadows and blend it much more easily. Okay, so I've got almost like a cylinder standing out very, very quickly. A tiny bit more light at the back. Maybe that's not too problematic. Right, and I can do now some textures on it as well. Well, meaning textures, that's the black and blue. I'm gonna do it light, you know, the stripes of the different levels of the lighthouse. So for the lighthouses, they will use all sorts of techniques, how for the boats to recognize them in the water, in the storm, in the fog, so they could be seen. So for example, yeah, the bright white, the contrast with the black, the unusual shape of that pattern, you know, how it breaks down, so it's could be recognized not just as light, but unusual shape. It must be the lighthouse then. So I'm painting some blocks first, and then I'll make it more three-dimensional. Another one was obviously the flashing light, yeah, and moving light, so it's not constant. And recently I've been doing some workshops on the East Coast and staying in a little cottage near Flamborough, and we had a very foggy night, and I was woken up in the middle of the night by this noise, this strange noise. I thought, what is it? And it was a lighthouse making these sounds because of the fog for the boats to see it. So now I'm just doing just plain levels of those stripes. Okay, and then I can make them a bit more three-dimensional. So far they're just parallel blocks, a little bit higher, a little bit lower. Okay, this is just out of my piece of card. It's gonna go narrower. Okay, and then if I'll make it slightly darker on the edges, I'll go for that light darker blue and violet. Yeah, so maybe a little bit darker on one side. Okay. What I can see, my sky and the lighthouse are a little bit clashing here, so it starts almost like bending. So I might need to make the sky a tiny bit darker there. It's a bit of a visual illusion there. Okay, something darker there. A little rooftop for the lighthouse there as well. Right, tiny bit more darker. Sky in this area. Okay, and if I just blend it out. Okay, it's good. So I've got loads of texture, and suddenly I've got a very precise shape of the lighthouse. So I will break it down a little bit by adding maybe a couple of windows. Okay. And also by placing some extra highlights maybe on the rock. So we'll have some similar ultramarine kind of reflections on the rock facing the sky, maybe little indentations on. Okay. It's quite a nice, actually, fresh color of the blue. Can break it down with little dabs. So that's uneven surface, kind of an even surface. Maybe that could have a little bit more highlight somewhere as well on the black. So I'm just making it less perfect. Okay. Okay, the rooftop. A little highlight on the rooftop there as well. And I think actually this section could just stand out a little bit more. Tiny bit more wider. Starts interacting. So that just maybe in a bit more playful and a bit more making some adjustments and variations to it. Any of the dark tones. Okay, that's good. Okay, that's much more playful as well. Have dabs of extra marks, that's good. Now, because my board, in comparison to the, okay, that's better. Now you can see it's much more straighter, yeah? Because my board is looking in perspective, so the lighthouse looks slightly different, not perfectly straight. Right, so now let's play with a bit of extra color. So I do love that ultramarine and white. Just want to add a bit more of the color for the water. Maybe a slightly lighter version of the ultramarine, slightly darker version of it. Let's start with some of it there. So I can have more precise strokes, and I can have still, with a small brush, apply similar broken strokes, similar to what we were doing with the large brushes. But I need to be careful not to overwork it. Major work is already done. Just want to almost just help it out slightly more, but not make it worse. Okay. I'm going to compare some of the gaps which are a bit too similar, so maybe reinforce and break that repetitive rhythm. And that pale ultramarine with a little bit more water on the brush. Could also go a little bit more diluted strokes. Close to some of the rocks. I think I need something paler here. Okay. Maybe some more round edge pebbles. Some of them under the water, some of them on the surface. Just want to have the feel for it without painting too many. Okay, that's maybe too broken down. Let's take some of that off. Okay. So the light still stays there, which is great. Maybe let's bring a little bit more fresher light and just dragging away from the waves. I've got a gap between two different card surfaces, so that's good. just fill that little pocket. Okay, good. A little bit more extra highlights. Same semi-dry brush strokes. Yeah, just little drags. Okay, this one I need to just link a little more of that little curve of light. But again, it's totally fine to keep it more guessable rather than too precise. Our viewers will recognize it. Okay, that's good. Maybe a couple of thinner lines. Maybe not broken, but just thinner lines. Okay. We can have a big splash anywhere by the rocks, or maybe a big splash by the lighthouse. And that will be all really exciting as well. But I think if I'll do hint of light next to the rocks of the lighthouse, maybe some almost like a light on the water from the sky. A little bit more longer drag. And I fancy doing a splash here. Now, if you feel experimental, like I am, just watch that this area is dry. I'm gonna do a tiny bit of planning, some reflections for that light. Just gonna prepare it with these rocks. Tiny bit of water highlights. Okay, and I'm gonna go for my bigger brush. Just gonna give it a clean. Gonna give it a dry. I want to keep it quite wet. Quite a lot of paint on it, but at the same time, because it's sat in the pot, it has got a lot of water as well. And I want to do a little bit of a kind of splash coming out from here. So by just using the brush, kind of directing it, maybe, yeah, so if my waves are going here, they're just kind of, yeah, they come in and going over the rock, they kind of been stopped by that rock. So that's going to have some sort of a big splash. Okay, I've lost a little bit contrast in there. But if I'll bring it a little bit more further here, and then break it with some more darker tones behind, I think I'm on the winner. Right, so that's splash gone there. And if I'll go for some thicker paint as well, maybe I'll do another splash somewhere here. I don't have to do splashes. This is just my playful experiments. Or if you want to do splash, practice it. That's brilliant. Right, we'll go for some solid, stronger acrylic white. It's more stronger and bold and white than my emulsion. Let's have some lovely qualities to it as well. It's more of a swirl. I'll bring tiny bit of darkness behind it as it dries. And I can have touch-ups of some white here as well. Okay, now I could have stopped a long time ago. I could carry on and play with it. Again, depends how much details you want to put or when you want to stop. Okay, I'm quite happy with that one. Tiny bit of maybe light and some of these rocks. Good, I like that. I quite like that a lot. Great. Now, so as I said, tiny bit more darkness just behind this wave, and I'm more or less finished. So some blue, some ultramarine, and emerald green. I can just subdivide some of the shapes where my splash might be stopping, or what's seen behind it. Okay, that's probably plenty. So without doing over too much, I'm just defining, just tiny bit define that shape of the white splash. I think that blue looks quite nice to bring it across. And as I said, it could be really playful time, could really go for it, but it doesn't have to be overly complex. Anything here? I think that's enough. So it just stands out for the lighthouse here. That's it. I think I'm going to stop at that. So loads of exciting things happening. Softer island at the back. Got soft and sharp edges on the sky. Really bold contrast of sharpness on the lighthouse. I've got that wilderness of the rocks and the water, and how everything is supporting each other and just getting that boldness, sea moving towards us. So here we go, folks. So now I've placed my painting on a white paper just to show you the edges I end up with. Yeah, I've got little steps, I've got bits of paper coming out, some uneven surfaces, so the card is sticking out. It's almost like the painting, the waves coming from the picture frame. Yeah, it's very, very exciting to see the unevenness of edges, and it could be even mounted in almost like a box frame, where you've got a bit more of a space within the frame. Yes, so it's three-dimensional, that relief. So if the board is a little bit wobbly on the sides, or kind of that's all of it is extra benefits. So I hope you have a good playtime, and I look seeing your finished paintings. Bye bye.